Thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many people here. In a moment, you're going to hear readings by the 6 writers shortlisted for the Pat Kavanagh Prize. Fahad, who won't be here, but we're hoping that Maura can access the poem and read it. Euan, Amna, Melissa, Molly and Sharmini. And they're different nationalities, ethnicities, English, Scottish, Californian, Ethiopian, Yemeni, Pakistani and Trinidadian. I think is a mark of the kind of diversity that we get on the MA programme in creative writing. And after these readings, 5 minutes each, thereabouts, Sophie Scard from United Agents will say a few words about each of the shortlisted writers and tell us who has won, and then until then we're in suspense. This prize was set up in 2009, so this will be its 14th year, in memory of the famous literary agent Pat Kavanagh, who died suddenly in 2009. She represented quite a range of writers, among them Ruth Rendell, John Irving, Andrew Motion, Wendy Cope, Robert Harris, Jeanette Winston, Clive James, William Trevor, and our own Adam Miles-Jones. She was married to Julian Barnes. She was also my agent, having taken me on when I published only a little academic book and a few poems. Like all authors, well, I don't know, maybe this wouldn't apply to Adam, but like most of us, we found her terrifying. We were besotted by her. She was very beautiful, had immaculate taste, but she also had this unnerving habit of leaving long silences after you'd spoken, so you felt you'd said something stupid, or you then did say something stupid, blurted it out. The good thing was that publishers really fell for this trick. You know, they'd make an offer for a book, and she'd be silent, and then they'd up it or double it. Those were the days. But most important, she was right till the end. Somebody who could continue to take on new writers, was always there to nurture new talents, and that's why it seems so appropriate to set up a prize in her name, because it's given to graduates of our MA Creative Writing programme, that's to say, talented authors usually at the beginning of a career. And each year we draw up a long list of the graduates on the MA programme. It goes to United Agents. They meet, I think, well, Sophie will tell you that in prodigious numbers of them get involved, and they draw up a shortlist and choose a winner. So Sophie will tell you more about that process. But just to say, we are so grateful for their collaboration, involvement and enthusiasm for this and for all the work they do. So now we'll go to the readings, and rather than me introducing everybody, I think they will just stand up and say their name, or in Maura's case we'll say Fahad's name, and read their work. If you want to read more of them, you can find the work on the United Agents website. So, Fahad, Maura, if you can access the poems. Take a seat.
It's absolutely wonderful to see so many of you here, and not just everybody who finished last year, but lots of people from different years who've come back. And it's one of the great things about the MA, I think, that you are your own best source of inspiration afterwards, and courage and support. It's wonderful to see you, so thank you. I'm reading one poem, that's all, from Fahad Al-Amoudi, who sent a very last-minute message saying, many apologies to everybody, something happened at the last moment, that personal thing, and he just couldn't get here. So he sends you all his very best wishes. And I've managed just to because my phone doesn't work in here, I've just got one photograph of one of his poems, which I will read on his behalf. The poem's called What I Mean When I Say the Blues. Mountains hemmed the cityscape like pegs on a washing line. Dark sky blue could go either way. Mum filled half a glass with tap water, rolled 2 pills in her hand like a consonant. Daylight swilled, let out a bored blue sigh, beat the clouds from their yoke to a Cyrus. Outside the window, blue baton street lamps bruised the pavement an indigo quilt. A fly in the ointment, the pupil in mum's left eye, blueberry juice, dusk polluting a river, mum's voice distant, as though underwater, a blue note. Fahad Al-Amoudi.
What the fuck is this, you daft fucking bastard? Sorry, I should explain. That is the opening line from my novel, Black Damp, which I finished during my time at Goldsmiths. It's the story of Tam, a young newspaper reporter in the early 1960s who gets sent to a remote mining village to cover the aftermath of a serious accident at the pit. He finds the village a forbidding place filled with hard-drinking, God-fearing locals, and they're very suspicious of him. Things take a turn towards the strange, supernatural even, and he finds his mind slipping and his life is in danger. If it fell into a genre, I'd have to describe it as folk horror, I think. The mid-century coalfields of Stirlingshire are not, I admit, the most glamorous backdrop for a novel. Somebody once described it as The Wicker Man meets the National Coal Board, which I really like. But personally, I love finding stories in unlikely places and giving voices to unusual and underrepresented characters. So, what the fuck is this, you daft fucking bastard? It's set in Scotland, by the way. When your boss greets you with that on a Monday morning, he hasn't got you in for a pay rise, that's for sure. Nisbet slammed the early edition down on his desk and massaged his temples with his eyes closed, exhaling like a pressure cooker. He opened the newspaper and hissed out the headline. City Councillor questioned over theft from Washing Green by Thomas fucking McTavish. The unfortunate author of this piece sat down uninvited on the chair opposite him and braced for the rest of it. Nisbet's deputy, Miller, stood against the wall, smoking in his smug way and eyeing him like a predator. City Councillor, said Nisbet. To be precise, Councillor Peden, or, as I have to address him every Tuesday evening in that freezing, dusty hall in Wrestlebrook, Right Worshipful Master Peden. And while I have seen him many a time in the formal dress of the craft, including the apron and the monogram tie, I have never, I must say, seen him in a fucking woman's dress. If the Right Worshipful Master Peden chooses to slip into his wife's twin set when she's out at the bingo, I have no knowledge of that. And even if I did, I wouldn't print it in the fucking pages of my newspaper. Overstepped the mark there, son, said Miller. A few of the reporters outside made furtive glances through the glass into Nisbet's office. They'd been witness to this kind of onslaught more than once, and they were mostly just pleased they weren't on the receiving end this time. Nisbet's office was an overlit cell today, a rigged courtroom with shining linoleum and stacks of papers as high as your waist. His framed children squinted at him from a corner of his desk. This is the sort of thing that we file away in that drawer there, the one marked "Did not fucking happen," Nisbet continued. It is no in the public interest to publish such prurient pish, and it is definitely no in my interest that you've seen fit to publish it. Of course, I'll be having words with Davidson. He should never have let it through, but he's stretched since Christie left. You should have known that this would have been hanging your coat on a sugary nail. Do you see what I'm fucking getting at here? Nisbet's face was now plum purple, but due to the fact it wasn't yet lunchtime, it couldn't be blamed on the bevy, thought Tam. The ferocity of the admonishment had caught him by surprise. He barely drained the dregs of his first cup of tea before he'd been summoned in. Mr. Nisbet, he managed, before another broadside shut him down. I'll Mr. Nisbet you. I'll Nisbet you so hard you'll stay Nisbeted for a fucking week. I'll Nisbet you so hard your wife will start calling you Mr. Nisbet. Miller sniggered at that one, even though it didn't make much sense. And anyway, The editor knew Tam wasn't married, having once used the fact to accuse him of being light in the loafers. Luke, Nisbet went on. What the fuck made you write such a thing, McTavish? And what made you do it on a Sunday, the day I'm not here to deliver approval? A day I'm instead visiting the Kirk and enjoying time with Mrs. Nisbet and the rest of the family. I thought Tam, and the rest of the bottle you fell asleep with on the Saturday night. Mr. Nisbet, he ventured. I've been looking at that story for a long time. It's shut it, son, Nisbet said, and capsized his body back into his seat, hands up. Okay, picture the scene. The Right Worshipful Master Peden rises this morning at 5:50 a.m. sharp. He was fond of painting such scenes, which he often employed to make points his authority was enough to do on its own. His good wife, Eleanor, arises herself at the same time, and whilst Mr. Peden takes care of whatever he must do at that delicate time after awakening, she prepares his breakfast. He is known to avoid protein, believing it to induce excessive passion. So I can only assume his repast involves no eggs and not too much fucking bacon, but I'm speculating, if he could hear himself. He says grace and tucks into his ascetical breakfast, and when he's finished, he sups the remainder of his tea. Even the faithful Miller was beginning to bore this story. He tapped his cigarette in an extravagant manner and watched the ash drift down to the bin.
Hello everyone, I'm Amna. I'm reading an excerpt from a novel in progress. The novel is set in Pakistan. It is about how young people navigate adulthood in conservative societies. It is narrated by two voices, one of a young woman and the other of a young man. What I'm reading tonight is the voice of the young man. His name is Babar. A note on one of the foreign words you'll hear. When you hear portion, it means a flat in a house. Think a Victorian terrace split into flats, but less posh. Babar. I remember her college uniform being all white. She looked even slimmer in white. She wore small gold hoops in her ears. Her hair was always braided down her back, her dupatta folded into a thick V across her chest and pinned to her shirt. It was a serious look, elegant even. The only thing that ruined it, in my opinion, was that manly black book bag she carried. Where on earth did she get that thing from, I would wonder. Still, I liked watching her hurry, almost skip down the driveway those mornings, a piece of tava blackened toast or an apple in her hand. I followed her once, at a distance. I wanted to confirm that she did in fact, on reaching the main road, get on the college bus. Because if she didn't, that would have been a huge scandal. Imagine a girl who for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, isn't accountable to anyone. We are in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan after all, not France. It turned out, however, that Sarah didn't need to leave the house to whore around. She did it all right there, right under our noses. We were the tenants upstairs. The stairs that led to our portion of Sarah's grandmother's house were towards the back, where the water pump and boilers were, and where their clothesline was strung. There was a little square lawn at the front of the house. We didn't get to use it because we had balconies upstairs, at the front and the back. We did share the driveway though, and because the old lady didn't have a car, it was ours to use as we pleased. I could therefore park whatever second-hand piece of shit we owned back then right in the middle of the driveway without any apprehension. That was handy. Because we had a car, our family business couldn't run without one. It was our job to lock the gate of the house at night and to open it up again first thing in the morning. When the old lady handed us a big china lock for this purpose and a set of shiny keys to go with it, she said, looking up from between her rounded shoulders and slightly hunched back, that it was better for men to be seen doing this sort of thing anyway. We didn't use an engineer or draftsman, the old lady told us proudly, the first time we went to see her upstairs portion. My late husband simply told the contractor to copy the downstairs layout, same to same, wall to wall. It was ready in months. 4 days prior to meeting Mrs. Ulvey for the first time, my father had abruptly announced that we would need to find a new place to live. He was fed up with our landlord at the time. a man whose name was Ashfaq, but who my father called the Sala Mirpuri. My father had announced this decision to the Sala Mirpuri too, in a rather dramatic fashion on the phone, so we really had no choice but to get out of there before the end of the month. Alongside calling property agents and looking at ads in newspapers, we started driving around all the subsectors of G9 and G10 in the evenings to note down any for rent signs hanging off the balconies and the associated telephone numbers. Once my father even said we could try for a portion in F10, but my mother swiftly asked if he had lost his mind. My father didn't react to this. He did his best to be charming in those days, knowing that my mother was in no mood to pack up everything and move again after only 2 years at the Sala Mirpuri's place. Imagine, he would say, leaning over towards her as he drove. If we get a big order soon and some of the cooking for it needs to be done at home, how will you manage it in the dirty little kitchen you have now when I can find you something new, something better? The truth was, my mother had stopped cooking for our business long ago. By then, her kebabs, samosas and spring rolls were made only for us, while the business catered for weddings with oily biryanis and chicken kormas made in a rented kitchen in the basement of the plaza where we had a one-room office. My father liked the old lady straight away. She was waiting for us in her driveway, the beads of her tasbih moving fast between her fingers. "You remind me so much of my mother, Mrs. Alvi," he said, soon after introducing himself and offering her his small, nervous smile. She reciprocated. "You remind me of my younger brother," she said, raising a hand affectionately in the direction of his shoulder, but not quite reaching. The two of them were stood under the shade of the car porch at the time. My mother, sister, and I were not. It was a hot day in May, and my mother used the edge of her dupatta to fan my sister's face. When we walked around upstairs, my mother and father disagreed about everything. My mother said that the portion was as small as the place we already lived in, and that the walls were dirty and the ceilings low. My father asked why my mother was intent on fighting over such small things when we could live in harmony with the sweet, harmless old lady downstairs. "She won't taunt or insult me like that Sala Mirpuri," he said. I wasn't aware till then that the Sala Mirpuri had taunted or insulted my father, but my father was sensitive and he had a way of perceiving such things.
So I'm Melissa. This is a bit from my novel in progress, which is about that part of your identity which is rooted in place, how it's constructed through landscape, through culture, through memory, and about what happens when you become disconnected from it. So it follows Bobby, who's Trinidadian, but has made a life for herself in England. She goes home for a 2-week holiday with family. So this is her first morning there, and it's a little bit of a sort of love song for Trinidad. Bobby's desire to get down to the shoreline felt urgent, connected to some sense that the holiday hadn't really begun until she felt the first sting of salt water on her skin. She skipped down the steps and across the strip of scrubby lawn in front of the house, then walked slowly across the yielding sand to the water's edge. The waves rolled in with a gentle roar. She watched them form in zigzag lines which overlapped each other politely. They moved across the surface of the water delicately, as if reluctant to break, their white tips glowing in the dawn light. She could smell the salt in the air and felt it on her skin as she stepped forward into the surprise of the cool water. Here, close to Trinidad's northern tip, with the wide world beyond it, there was nothing on the horizon. The boxy shape of the island sat like a sullen child, as if with arms and legs extended, waiting for the embrace of the South American mainland. In some prehistoric age, they had been one. When she first moved to England, there were drunken attempts to explain this to people in pubs. How Barbados was formed from coral, accounting for its white sands and crystal blue waters. But Trinidad was something else. It was a way into the singularity of the place, even if geography was the least of it. It lanky boys in donkey jackets. Bobby looked out at the deep blue water. Following the right line, her eyes might look across an expanse of water in which there was no landmass between her and Africa. She'd come from that continent. With her light skin and good hair, it was hard to think that in any real way. It was too complicated, too taxing in the peace of the early morning to think of the whole tortured history of the Caribbean. In all the years of family meals during which Tom had playfully drilled the girls about things that he knew and thought they should too, there seemed no room for anything as dark as her own history. Much better to confine themselves to the childish play that was divorced, beheaded, died. It took a minute for her to realise that the family he talked about with such intimacy had made the journey out to Barbados 400 years before. The gazebo made sense then. He was living out his idea of a man shipwrecked in paradise. Not 400 years or 20 generations could convince him that he really belonged to that island of black people. And Tom's appeal was his unsullied British whiteness. Trinidad was more complicated. Here, India and China and the Middle East converged with a mix of Europe and Africa. Not so black and white, Tom might have teased. It was a place which, when it detached itself from its primeval home as part of the South American continent, had departed with so many natural resources that they seeped out of the land. As a child, Bobby and her classmates were encouraged to dwell on the magic of a pitch lake which eternally replenished itself and could not be emptied, regardless of how much pitch you took out of it. More astounding to them was that it was a lake you could walk across, like Jesus. And protected by its mountains and in the bosom of the South American continent, Trinidad escaped the hurricanes which periled the rest of the Caribbean. And then there were the people, in enough colours to fill a Dulux chart. It was there for everyone to see on the streets at Carnival, the beauty of it. Sweaty bodies in all shades, black and white and brown and yellow, and that thing like her in Trinidad called red, crushed together. It felt as specific to the place as that wonder of the world which was the pitch lake. How not to believe in this as some other Eden? How not to proclaim, as Trinis did, when presented with some new evidence of their good luck, their capacity to escape misfortune. But here no, God is a Trinidadian.
I'm going to be reading a poem from my portfolio, which was a portfolio of eco-poetry, which was the first time submitting that I really thought of myself as an eco-poet. It's something that I'd kind of written for a long time, but not exclusively. And the portfolio was the first time that I put together a body of work that was sort of all eco-poetry and was doing the things that eco-writing tends to do, which I suppose I had to think about at the time. Because it wasn't something that I put that much thought into before. And in thinking about what I wanted my poetry to do as eco-poetry, I suppose I was influenced by all sorts of theory that sort of talks about what poetry should do. And there's the school of thought that says poetry makes nothing happen, poetry should make nothing happen. You know, the point of it is aesthetic. And I agree with that to an extent. I don't think that the point of eco-poetry is to necessarily precipitate concrete change. But at the same time, it feels odd to write about something like the climate emergency, which has this urgency to it, and to write about it in a way that doesn't do anything. And I suppose what I came down to is that I wasn't particularly interested in writing about despair and kind of existential climate-based despair, because I felt that there was enough of that already. Like, you turn on the news, you know, you read any news article and you can kind of, you get enough climate-based despair from that kind of thing. So in writing this collection, I was trying to bring something hopeful or funny or humorous, or just generally this idea that I could kind of cut through the numbness that we tend to feel when we turn on the news and we see another iceberg carving into the ocean or another, you know, species going extinct. Cut through that numbness with something that might make us feel something, which in this case hopefully is something more positive or hopeful or even humorous. So the poem that I'm going to read is called Hope is a Zombie Frog. Approximately 200 frog species have already gone extinct, and hundreds more may be on their way out. But this is not known to the rain frog, the dart frog, the edible frog on the mire. He's out there right now, some frog that missed the memo, waxing amphibious, looping his whoop through the night as though no frogs have died, as though no time has passed since the first of them, weighty and gaping, fell out of the sky in great surges of splat. These are the facts. Hope is a tree frog, wide-eyed, ridiculous, clinging to life. Hope is a bellowing bullfrog, a pool frog, a plains frog, and hope is a flying frog, gleaming as through a leaf greenly, alert in the handsomest part of the dark, blinking at dinner, one eye on the bird at his back. Frogs live almost everywhere, between the lines. The African dwarf frog is known to sink through winter, semi-immersed in sludge to wait the season out, and so am I. Yes, hope is a woken-up, waterlogged frog, hopping madly, making off with lost time. Or that longest of shots, the wood frog, frost-racked with his stopped heart and his stopped clock, unfeeling, unfreezing. Hope is hear me out, a zombie frog, functioning dead and sputtering back to life for no good reason. As flotsam at some winter's shore, a feeble thing, he coughs up cold, and sensing sunlight starts to sing of darkness and the drift of days and dreaming. Hope is a breeding chorus in the evening, a riot of bleating, a rivet, an encore. Hope is an earful of croak that nobody asked for. Ah, but who among us has not, late at night, mouth to spout with a drain pipe broadcast a little too long? Petitioned too fervently, frog god, I beg you, take me back to the sweet release of a demi-death in the deepest dark. I thawed too soon, and all my friends are awful. And shortly after, wandering strange wastes in a changed place with a changed eye, upchucked in public. Who among us has not closely known that scalded cry in forest fire, that fevered keen, I thawed too slow, and found my daughters dead. All of my tadpoles, save one of them, sizzled this evening, save one of them, one of them. Hope is an echoing plea in the heat of the evening, and hope is its own reply. So here it is. Pristimantis Prometheae, one of our latest, Prometheus frog, fire taker, muck shaper, maker of myth. On the days that it seems all the good frogs are ghosts, hope is a freshly found thing rising under the ribs overnight till it outbids the breaks. Or hope is rewriting, rain frog and plains frog and forest frog, common frog, glass frog and golden frog, moss frog and marsh frog and chorus frog. We do not have names for many, perhaps most species of frogs, which will not stop them dying. It will not stop them leaping, nameless, in the near dark, wild and shining. It will not stop their frog song, low and looping by the water, or their falling without feathers, or their flying. Hope, they still croak, is a patience game, a waiting to wake, a refrain, a refrain. Nothing but hidden rhythms, nothing but freeze and thaw in open throats, rise up, hold ground. There is no frog-forsaken place each side of snow. Hope is the snare drum shuffle of rustling leaves in the green old dark, and dead frogs waking.
Hi everyone. Really nice to see so many Goldsmiths faces here. It's like a reunion, I love it. I'm going to be reading from my novel about an American woman living undocumented in Oldham who gets unexpectedly pregnant. And in this scene, she's just gone to the GP to beg for a referral to a clinic because she can't afford the price of an abortion. Was it abuse? The GP asked. Oh, and by the way, the American woman, right, the narrators are American, but for all the other characters, you're just going to have to imagine I'm doing a northern accent. Okay. Was it abuse? The GP asked. She crossed her arms, looked towards me, her head tilted down at a patronizing angle. Did you get pregnant through abuse or sexual assault? I shook my head. I think I laughed. That's crazy, I said. Look, I have the papers. I can get a passport. I just need time and... Because if you say it was abuse, then we have to help you. It wasn't abuse. Had I slouched too much? What did I look like? Someone falling apart? I sat up straight, wiped my eyes. I placed my palms down on my thighs, elbows out to the side to match the GP's posture. Of course, if it wasn't abuse, but if you need assistance, I can give you the number of someone. I won't be able to say it was abuse because it wasn't abuse, I said. The GP shrugged. Look, there's nothing much I can do. I'll make a few calls, but your best bet is to contact the American Embassy. Contact the American Embassy about having an abortion. I laughed again. I was cured of my crying and happy for it. What a ridiculous show, this doctor who hadn't even checked my blood pressure. Please, I said, I'm not trying to scam you. I really don't have the money. Why won't anyone believe me? What am I supposed to do? Why won't you believe me? Yes. Oh, I just came to England for a free abortion. It's all I ever wanted. I spent the money to fly all the way out here and get pregnant so I could have an abortion. Please, if someone would just listen. Cavemen didn't have any money either, the GP said. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Nothing she could do, nothing I could do. Nothing to do but walk. Back up the hill, back towards my room, bed, temporary home. Walk up the hill past small, untended gardens, crumpled chip packets in plastic bags instead of bushes and flowers. My legs led. I'd walked so much in the past month, to the pub and back, to supermarkets, to the library, walked to the tram to get out of the city, walked to wear out some of the energy I couldn't contain. I'd been walking, but I felt so weak. My thighs burned, my ankles shook as they bent on the hill. Nothing she can do, nothing I can do. A group of men appeared before me on the same side of the street. Young men, teenagers from the way they moved both forward and into each other all at once. We reached a spot halfway up the hill, across from a boarded-up yellow brick church. Behind the church, an old mill tower blotted out the sky. The men, teenagers, made no move to cross. They parted slightly, but not enough that I could pass without having to touch them. I refused to cross the street, walked through the narrow gap. One of them bumped my shoulder. I saw the impact before it arrived, but the moment of contact was still a shock. "Hey, the teenager said, his face so close I could see thin brown hairs above his lip. He wore a gray zip-up jacket, gray pants. I kept walking. 1 leaden foot, 2. The boys giggled, a teenage boy giggle, a choke as much as a laugh. "Hey," one of them shouted. "My friend said, hey. Aren't you going to say hey back?" 1 leaden foot, 2. "Hey!" More choking laughter. "Don't fucking keep walking. My mate just wants to say hi to you." I stopped, turned slowly, 1 step at a time. They were farther down the hill, but all turned around, looking up at me. "Fuck off!" I yelled. "Whoa, he was just being nice. You don't have to be a bitch." "What did I say? Fuck off." I clenched my fists, pulled my shoulders back, raised my arms out to the sides. I took a step forward like I was about to run down the hill and ram right through them. If they had stepped towards me, I would have. I wanted them to step towards me so I could throw myself at them. "Fuck off," I yelled. You don't go around bothering fucking women on the street, you fucking nothing, fucking nobody, little boys. You need to fucking just stick to yourself and fucking leave people alone and shut your fucking mouths and not touch people when you're walking on the street. You can't fucking touch me. Fuck off. I didn't see them disappear. I was still yelling when I looked up and realized they were no longer on the same street as me.
Hello everyone. It's my job to announce the winner of this year's prize, and it's a privilege to do so. I have read for this prize for 10 years, and I can't remember a year as strong as this. 8 other judges read this year's entries, and we all agreed that this is particularly strong writing. I've written down: inventive, stylish, funny, and truly wide-ranging in its themes and preoccupations. I want to congratulate all of this year's students on their work. Was, we felt, remarkably accomplished, displaying impressive levels of confidence and control for a writer at the beginning of their career. For their brilliantly clever, disarmingly propulsive entry, our winner is Amna. More drinking, absolutely. But also, seriously, it was a really, really good year, and every single shortlisted writer, and lots of the longlisted writers too, had a personal champion amongst the people reading. So I want you all to know that prizes are an interesting thing, and you all are very, very talented. So I hope you keep going.
Step forward.
Possibly a bank transfer.
And Amna, you don't want to say anything particularly. Did you want to say a word, or?
I suppose just a massive thank you to obviously United Agents, but all the tutors that I worked with. Most are in the room, but some aren't. Starting with Maura, I still remember the interview with her. And I knew straight away I was in safe hands, and then Ardu and Blake and Tom and Stephen Knight and others who I'm sure I'm forgetting, but it's just been absolutely invaluable, and all the students as well. Yeah, I couldn't have done it without all that input from everyone, so thank you so much.
Very high quality work. Also the readings were excellent tonight, without exception. So what do we do now? We have a drink and stay around and chat, I hope.
Celebrate.
Yeah, but thanks again.